Hello, everybody, on this beautiful, what is this? Oh, it's Wednesday, this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. So happy the sun is shining, and I'm so happy that you're here with us. We had the distinct pleasure of hearing from Dr. Catherine Pearlman last night, and how lucky that we are back together again. I hope many of you had a chance to listen in. And if not, Dr. Pearlman was very generous. We will be posting the link to last night's program at glenbardgps.org. Look for past events, Dr. Pearlman's page, and that's where you'll see the link for last night's program, and that's where you'll be able to see the link for the program this afternoon. When we begin our programs, I always want to take a minute to thank the many people that help make this possible, the people behind the scenes like Susan and Jerica, Carrie, and so many of you who take the time to share the information. And this is one of the big ask of you is to please share, comment, so that we can spread the word of this excellent resource for families. We say now more than ever, GPS. So thank you for your help to make that happen. Thank you to the libraries. Thank you to the schools. Thank you to our annual sponsors who are listed here. Emmy Gaffey Foundation, Prevention Leadership Team of the DuPage County Health Department, DuPage Medical Group, the Coalition at District 93 on Birth to 5, Holiday Inn, Case the Special Ed Cooperative, the Sabrin Goodman Center of the Lillian and Larry Goodman Foundation, the Glenbard Early Childhood Collaborative, Kiwanis, College of DuPage. We're welcoming many new people, that organizations you saw on that slide, like Navigating Adolescence, Kids Matter Too, Bensonville Youth Coalition, One Community, League of Women Voters, and the list grows, and we're grateful for that. Let's talk about coming up really quickly. There is a very important program next Tuesday that will appeal to many. I know it's very, very timely. What will education and what will careers look like after COVID? And we're very fortunate to have a true expert in Heather McGowan. She will be discussing most likely to succeed, anticipating the future of careers and education. That's Tuesday at 9. There will also be a distinguished panel. Darlene Rossetti, Regional Office of Education Superintendent, Dr. David Larson, District 87 Superintendent, the President of the College of DuPage will be speaking, Brian Caputo, along with Dr. Lourdes Ferrer on equity. Leading from that conversation, we're very excited to welcome back Julie Lycop Haynes. She has a new book called Your Turn, a real how-to on adulting, and she'll also discuss her important book, one of my favorites, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. And then shortly after that, in April, we have a distinguished roundtable on social justice. So upcoming with GPS, there's lots for everyone. And I see following that, we have Dr. Michelle Borba on her new book called Thriving, How to Help Children Thrive in These Challenging Times. So go to glenbardgps.org. There's the entire lineup, Blackademically Speaking with Dr. Chandra Gill, a program on mindfulness, and finishing up the year, it's almost there, the addiction inoculation, raising healthy, happy kids in a culture of independence with Jessica Leahy. The Gift of Failure is her other book. So that's what's coming up. The format today, we have Dr. Pearlman, who will be speaking for about half an hour. She wants to know who's here in the room, and so please let us know who you are. She'll be telling you more about that. Without further ado, it's my honor to introduce her. Dr. Catherine Pearlman started the Family Coach to help moms and dads with typical parenting issues. Her mission is to help parents deal with parenting and enjoy their kids more. She has been a featured speaker for nonprofit groups and academic conferences around the world. She also conducts parenting seminars relating to practical parenting, behavior modification, setting expectations, and so much more. In addition to her private practice, she's also an assistant professor in the social work program at Brandman University. She writes a nationally syndicated column called the Dear Family Coach column. Her articles appear on so many different periodicals, too numerous to mention, but they range from Sports Illustrated to the Huffington Post to family magazines like the New York Ladies Home Journal. She's truly recognized as a parenting expert. She received her doctorate in social welfare at Yeshiva University. She lives in California with her husband and mostly well-behaved two children and dog Norma. Without further ado, an honor, Dr. Catherine Pearlman.
Hi, good morning or afternoon where you are. I'm in California. So before we get started, it would be great just to, in the chat pane, if you could write if you're a teacher, social worker, counselor, principal, what's your role in the school, just so I have a sense of maybe who's in the room, and I could always tailor it a little bit to who we have here. I thank you so much for coming during your lunch hour. I know this is precious time, so hopefully I'll give you something to think about. So could we start with the slides, please? Oh, a home visitor. That's my passion. Nice. All right, let me just pull up the chat pane. Okay, great. All right, so if we could go to the next slide, please. All right, so just a little bit real quick about who I am and why I'm here today talking to you about kindness. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been working with children and families for 25 years. And I started working in nonprofits. And when I had my own kids and I saw people around me having kids kind of struggling with everyday parenting issues like sleep, eating, discipline, sibling rivalry, potty training, just things that really make it less fun to be a parent, but actually have real solutions for. I started the Family Coach, my private practice, where I would go into homes and observe and then offer them support and solutions for some of these issues. And I was able to see a lot of improvement, and but I could only work with one family at a time. And so eventually I started writing more about parenting, and I wrote a book called Ignore It, which really is a summary of everything I would do when I would go into the home with a parent, focusing on behavioral modification and a technique called Ignore It. And so this relates nothing at all to kindness, but I'm going to get there in the next slide. I'm a professor at Bremen University, and I love research. I teach research. I love to read research, and that comes into play a little bit when we talk about kindness. So my whole kindness journey started at Starbucks, which I'm gonna tell you briefly, and then we'll talk about how that relates to kindness culture in school. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So in 2018, the end of 2018, I went into Starbucks and I saw this flyer that's there on the left, and a man who needed a kidney. And I guess I'm sure I've seen these advertisements before, but for some reason this one just struck me, and I was at a place in my life where I felt like I could do this. So I filled out the health questionnaire and was eligible. And I donated my kidney about 5 months later after a whole lot of testing to Eli. That's Eli and I on the right, the day after our transplant surgery. And a lot happened in this process that kind of made me focus on kindness a little bit. But I'm going to just show you a quick video. It's about 3 minutes, a little bit about our journey and how it relates to kindness. And then we'll move on to how it works in schools.
I met Eli in high school, and it was at a party that I probably wasn't supposed to be at. We've been married for 17 years. When I found out that Eli needed a new kidney, I had to do something. I decided to go social media, and I started creating flyers. He was not happy about it. He didn't want to go that far.
I didn't really want people to know my situation. It wasn't until she explained that no one's going to come knocking at my door offering up their kidneys or me.
My name is Pearlman. I'm a social worker and a professor. I just was wasting a little time and stopped for a coffee. This flyer just caught my eye. There's something about somebody asking for a kidney on a flyer that really struck me.
Eli Valdez, my honey of 27 years, needs a living kidney donor as soon as possible.
He was looking for somebody who was O positive, and I'm O positive, so it just kind of clicked, like maybe this would work out. I made the decision right then to go and fill out the health questionnaire right there in the car, in the parking lot. The hospital called 2 days later and was like ready to get me in and start testing. And so I thought, wow, I should probably tell my husband about this. I remember driving to the hospital maybe 3 or 4 times for testing. So there was a lot of time for thinking. And a lot of the time I was thinking about if this was really gonna happen, what were people gonna say? I think people understand when you donate to somebody who's a family member, but it seems very odd to donate to somebody you don't know.
I just couldn't understand that somebody was actually going to do this for a total stranger, so I loved her instantly.
When I received the news that I was a match, I was excited.
When we got a date in the books, I knew that was it.
The first time I met Catherine was at the hospital. And I remember her walking in with her husband.
There was just a lot of emotions that morning. There's just nerves and excitement.
We met them, we hugged them, and they whisked her off to prep.
As we walked away, my husband and I both got really just kind of choked up about the whole thing.
The surgery went fine. As soon as they took the kidney out of Catherine and put it inside me, it started working like immediately. Every time I touch my side, I think of what she's done for me. I know she's the one that she saved my life.
That was the day I realized we have hope. Sorry. We both want to do so much more for our community, for the people around us. Thanks to Catherine.
I would like people who hear my story to just think about acts of kindness. You don't have to do some grand act. I really believe that small acts of kindness make a really big difference in people's worlds. I can't help all the people that are suffering in the world, but I helped one person and improved his life, and that feels really good.
Thank you. So Hyundai made that video because they found out that I filled out the health questionnaire in my Hyundai. So they made this little social media campaign video, and it's actually very uncomfortable for me to share the video or for me to talk about this sort of journey.
How long does it take to drive 1 million miles? This 2013 Elantra owner did it in 5 years with the original powertrain.
Sorry about that. So it's a little uncomfortable for me to talk about my kidney story. It's something I just did privately. I felt good about it. I went home. I got to know Eli and Monica, and they're amazing people. They are probably the kindest people on earth, lovely, amazing people. And that was that. You know, I didn't really plan on making much of this. And if you could go on to the next slide. The one more. Yep, one more. And so I went home and everything was great, went back with my life, and I started kind of realizing 3 things that really changed my course a little bit. The first was that there are still 100,000 people waiting for a kidney. So I helped one person, and that was great, but that was all I could do. And there are all these other people who are just like Eli, who are great people, have loving families, and are contributing to their community. And who's going to help them? And if I stay quiet in my house and I don't talk about this, then I'm helping nobody. I just helped Eli. And the second thing I realize is every time I do talk about what I did and our journey here, it changes somebody else. So they maybe decide to be an organ donor on their license, or maybe they sign up to be a living donor, or maybe they just feel motivated to do some kind of kindness. When I originally told nobody except a couple of friends and family when I was doing this. And then the day before I put it up on Facebook just to kind of get it out there, like, hey, I'm doing this. And all the talk was about kindness. It was really about kindness. And it really started putting that idea. It was just something I did. I didn't really think much about it, but it really started focusing on the idea of kindness. And then the third thing that really hit me was that I really got an inside view into what it's like to be the recipient of great kindness, because through my relationship with Eli and Monica, I could see the other side of it. You know, it's usually you do the good deed and you don't, that's the end of it. But I really could see how my one act changed his life and his family, and how meaningful that was to them. And also from me, how meaningful personally that was to me, even if nothing came of it. So the idea that kindness is more than that one act started kind of going through my head a little bit. And I dug down into the research about that. We could go to the next slide. So there's three research studies that, three kinds of research studies, they've been replicated, that really made a lot of sense to me moving forward. Could we go to the next slide? Oh, great. I wanted to just talk about three kinds of studies here. So the first one, they decided to give people $5, and they divided the people into two groups, and half the group got to keep the $5 and half the group had to give the $5 away. And at the end of the day when they gave the money away, the researchers would go back and do a survey about their happiness and satisfaction level. And of course, you can imagine the people who gave it away were happier. And I think that's something that on first glance, we would think the opposite. You know, you get money, it makes you happier. But the act of giving it away made people happier. And then they replicated the study with $20, thinking, okay, maybe if it was more money, the results would be different, but it wasn't. So people who gave something away, did an act of kindness, were happier than those who just had something given to them. And then the second study is that one kind deed makes you happier, and then the happier you feel, the more kindness you pass on. So that makes a lot of sense. You do kindness and you feel happy, that happiness is reinforcing the behavior, then you're going to do that more often. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then the third thing that I learned in research is that kindness is contagious. So the more people see a kindness, the more, whether it's to themselves or other people, the more they're going to actually go ahead and show empathy and be kind. And you see this a lot on social media, especially around the holidays. There'll be notes of people paying huge tips, or treating people, or giving them a car for work. And you see that, and it motivates you to, gee, I wish I could do something nice for someone. And then maybe you would. Years ago, I was driving to Florida from New York with my family, my two kids and my husband, and we stopped at some random restaurant. We had dinner, everything was fine. And we went to pay the bill, and somebody had paid it for us. And we have no idea who it was. We have no idea why they did it, but we felt so special. We just felt just something so incredible about that act. And so what did we do? We paid for somebody else's meal. It's contagious. Okay, next slide, please. So why bother cultivating kindness culture in schools and communities? Well, there's a couple of reasons that are really important, I think, especially for young people. So when somebody receives kindness, and even when someone gives kindness, their hormones, their happy hormones start pumping. So oxytocin is released, and serotonin. And these are very good, healthy hormones for people. And especially for young people, it improves mood. It helps with learning. It's good for the health. And especially nowadays, where we're seeing more depression and anxiety with young people, more suicide, you know, this is just a simple way to kind of raise the bar, raise the level of health and mental health and happiness in the school community. And it also helps with self-esteem as well. If we go to the next slide. So in my book, I really focus on a concept about positive and negative reinforcement. And the idea is that anything that happens after behavior will determine whether that behavior happens more or less often. And behavior that has a reward of any kind will be repeated, right? So if you feel like you get something out of something, you're more willing to do it. And I used this example last night, but you know, if your boss didn't recognize the good work you did, would you still work as hard? You know, if you're a student and you're really trying hard to, you know, do something in the classroom and nobody's noticing, like, are you going to keep up that effort? Maybe not. But rewards can come in all kinds of formats. It can be a star, it can be a high five, it could be praise, it can be an award, it can be something material. There's so many ways to reward kids, but you have to reward the behavior that you want to see more often. And sometimes I like to focus on that instead of working on the discipline, especially in places where kids are having a lot of issues, where they're struggling for whatever reason. In my book, I briefly detail a research study where they use this concept in schools to reduce bullying. And what they did is they prepped the whole school about what to do when there was a bullying incident. And usually the bully gets a lot of attention, and that's a form of reward, even if it's negative attention. And what they did is they trained the kids to say no to the bully and then immediately direct all of their attention to the victim. And what they saw was that bullying was reduced and that pro-social behavior was increased, which is just, you know, a really simple way of focusing on the good and to eliminate the bad. Okay, so can we go to the next slide? So now we get into kind of specifics about changing the school environment. And kindness has to be a school-wide priority. It has to be from the top down. It has to be something that everybody's invested in. It has to be something that's more than just like a week of kindness, which I think those things are great, more than just wearing a color on a certain day. It has to be an effort that's ongoing, that's all year, that's from the top down. It's important to create a common language around kindness, about what we expect, about how we talk about things, and to provide a framework for the entire community for what we're doing. Can you go to the next slide? So one way to do that is to kind of formalize the culture by having things throughout the year, by starting with a kindness council. And you can have a kindness commissioner. I mean, doesn't that sound nice? Where you're having kids, parents, teachers, administrators, all on the kindness council, working together to work on the environment throughout the year. And so I recommend at the end of the year, you elect the people for the following year so that you're all set to go when the new school year begins. And then you can have several events throughout the year. Some things build up to those events, so it's not just that one event. You can have classroom competitions. There's nothing like a little healthy competition. Simple things like random acts of kindness Fridays or pay it forward Tuesdays. You can use the announcements every day for just like a brief shout out for a kind deed that was seen. Again, kindness is contagious. So the more you can show it and showcase it, the more often someone's going to be like reminded, oh yeah, that's something that I can do. And you could have awards as well. So this is a sample of some ideas that you could do during the year. Next slide, please. So kindness also has to be a focus in the classroom, in the individual classroom. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Again, focusing throughout the entire year. So one nice way is to do class service projects that are ongoing. And you know, each classroom can pick an organization, or they can pick a cause, or they can even just decide they're going to bring in baked goods every week and donate those to a senior center. You know, every week someone is assigned to make baked goods, and that gets delivered to a senior center, and that's it. Or it could be very in-depth, but something that's ongoing, something that kids can feel good about, and something that actually does good for the community and builds bridges is good. And then also for assignments, you know, a day in the life assignments where you're interviewing somebody, and it's not just who they are and describing them, but how they felt. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about getting into feelings. But when you're reading a story, ask them, like, what would it be like to be in that scenario? Or instead of just, you know, plot, but also think about the social emotional growth in these assignments. And they could be many little things is better than one big thing. You know, finding ways to get it in there in a lot of ways is really more helpful. Okay, next slide, please. So A good deed log. So kids do logs for reading and they do logs for physical education. As a parent, I loathe those logs. So it's ironic that I'm also going to tell you to do another log, but I think they're important and I get the value. This is a good deed log, and it would be great for kids to log the things that they're doing so that it kind of adds up. And at the end of the year, they see, wow, look at what a difference I made. Look at all the nice things I did. And there's also another purpose in this. So when my kids were, I don't know, in elementary school, one of my kids is extremely thoughtful, kind, and empathetic, and the other one, it comes less easy to. And so we wanted to do something where we would kind of build empathy in our house and do something nice for the community. So we spent a year of doing good deeds once a week, either as a family or individually. We would do good deeds. It could be picking up garbage at a local Starbucks outside in the parking lot. It could be doing a lemonade stand, doing a walk for a cause. I mean, we really diversified. And in the beginning, my child who needed this the most was the most resistant. She was not happy. And there was a lot of whining, complaining, which I talk about in my book about ignoring. It's fine. We're still going to do it even though you're unhappy about it. But what was amazing is a couple months in, she started to suggest things that made sense to her. She started to have ideas and get excited about it. And it was like amazing to watch this change. So I think there is a benefit in doing a little over a long period of time, especially for some of the kids where it really doesn't come easy to. Anything can go on the log. It can be big or small. It does not have to be something grand. It doesn't matter. We could do awards and you could share in the classroom. So, once a week, someone shares what they've done in the classroom. And then, teachers can then share that if there's something really special with the principal or the administration to then share that in the announcements. So that people are getting ideas and getting recognized for it. And then the last thing is, a community service requirement. A lot of high schools have a community service requirement, but they really don't for younger kids. And if we want to kind of build this idea of giving back to your community, we shouldn't wait till they're 13, 14, 15 to kind of encourage that kind of giving back. The younger you start, the more it becomes of like who we are as people, is that we give back to our community. Okay, next slide, please. So this goes back to, positive reinforcement, but we have to reinforce kindness. We have to make sure that we're recognizing it. Otherwise, we might be less likely to see it. Kids might be less likely to actually do it. So again, kindness awards, daily kindness announcements. I once went to a conference for people who ran camps and worked in camps, and we had an amazing speaker. And every now and then he just had everybody stand up and high five each other and say, "You're doing a great job." And we sat down, and we were adults. And it was actually amazing. It sounds so ridiculous, but it was amazing to see the effect that just having a high five and being told by a complete stranger that we're doing a good job, that was actually meaningful. And when I used to work in agencies and I would have staff meetings, I used to give out gold stars, like those little ones you do in the classroom, for different good things I saw in the staff. And again, these are adults, but they would put it on their notebooks and they would feel good about it. So I think that it's really important to not forget to reinforce kindness in as many ways as possible. And empathy is a journey. And as I mentioned earlier, it does not come easily to everyone. And it's the kids that find it the hardest, or who have the worst behavior, or who don't seem to be the most kind, who need this the most. And that you have to really find the good and the kind and the special in those kids and work harder at reinforcing them. It's human nature to kind of see the shiny light and to reinforce that. But it's great. We should reinforce it for those kids too. But it's really, really important for the kids that are really far from for this coming naturally to them, to get reinforcement for finding even the littlest thing that they're really shining with and doing well. Okay, next slide, please. So I know that I'm pretty sure there's some social workers on the call, and all about talking about feelings. For kids, it's very confusing. They really have a couple of feelings that they can identify and in themselves or in other people. And the more that they can start to recognize how other people are feeling, the more they can experience empathy, the more they would be more interested in being kind, because they could recognize that somebody is going through something. And sometimes we forget to actually teach the feelings. And so I love having a feelings chart up. I love this for parents. I love it for teachers. It sometimes is too threatening for kids to say, I'm feeling this way. You can even ask about a character in a book. How is she feeling? What does she experience? What do you think? And might even have a discussion in the class about how they're feeling. So talk about feelings a lot. You can role play about what, if kids are like, okay, what does hopeful look like? Or what is envious? You could do a little role play just for fun to get kids to understand feelings. Okay, next one, please. So this is just an example for the younger kids to get them to have some ideas about how they can show kindness. And again, like even smiling at someone, saying good morning, holding the door. These are just little things, but they encourage people to think about other people first. And that helps with the culture. So, you could do this for a month and they have to do all these things and they cross it off when they do it. You could do it like a bingo game. So everybody has a different board. And so that today we're going to give someone a high five and everybody crosses that off their board. And then we give prizes for bingo. There's a lot of ways to make this fun and get kids involved in it that are younger, maybe don't understand the concepts as well. You can go to the next slide too, please. This might be hard to see, but it's another example. There's a great website called randomactsofkindness.org, and they have so many resources, so many ideas. So you don't have to recreate everything yourself. There I think are a lot of good things out there. Okay, next slide, please. So as I was saying in the beginning of talking about the culture, that we have to, as adults, model the kindness that we want to see, model the behavior that we're looking to see. This should be like a community-wide effort from the top down. And so kids need to see adults being kind. They need to see adults being recognized. And they kind of like seeing behind the curtain a little bit sometimes with relationships in schools and friends. And so the more you can get adults on board and to, give them shout outs and to have them model the same kind of kindness, the better. Because this shouldn't just be like, oh, this is a thing kids do. This is something that we all should be doing more of. Okay, next one, please. As much as you can make it fun, this shouldn't be a chore. This should just be like life and fun and something kids want to do. And then don't give up if you get resistance. That is normal to any kind of change. And sometimes that's out of fear. And the more people kind of get into it, the more that dissipates. So a lot of times, like when I've worked with parents individually, and we try and work on this, they're like, it's not working. Or even when we're trying to change behavior, it's very frustrating. It's not working. And then it's almost like a light switch and boom, it's like amazing. Something happens, something changes. So make it fun and don't give up, when there could be some kind of resistance. And then the last slide. So here's a couple of good websites that I recommend to use in the classroom, and my website. I have a couple of resources there that might be helpful, and how to get in touch with me. But that's what I came here to say. And if anybody has any questions or they want to talk about pro-social behavior, building kindness, anything, I'm here for it.
You got us crying, Catherine. If that was the intention, well then, well done. We started off with that. I think your talk is so timely when I think of this challenging time and how this is what occurs to me. I am the sponsor to a group of high school kids called Reality Illinois. They're the teen board to the health department. Yesterday, we had a speaker on compassionate leadership, and the speaker was addressing some of Brene Brown's work around empathy versus sympathy and around how empathy builds connection. And can you talk about empathy and connection that is just so key now?
Yeah, I think so. Also, I was thinking about, in the pandemic, This has been such a hard year for so many of us, so many kids, so many parents. And I just found even for me personally, when I was really at low points during this year, that doing something for somebody else really gave me purpose, gave me something to feel good about. It raised my mood. So even just like making a meal for somebody, sending a book in the mail, writing a card. My husband wrote cards to people. That is selfish. I'm doing it for myself, but also it makes someone else's day. So I think even when we're really low, that's something that we can do to help ourselves. But empathy is such a funny thing. I learned after donating my kidney that there's a woman who is doing research on altruism and empathy, and she realized that there's a part in the brain that the amygdala is bigger for kidney donors than there are for the general population. But what she also told me is it can change. It's not like this fixed thing where you either have empathy or you don't. It can change. And so, developing, and that's why for me at a very young age where we start helping kids that especially like it doesn't come naturally for them, to give them opportunities to get the sense of goodness that they feel, and then they can learn why they should do that. Sometimes, we think, oh, isn't it enough that I tell you, though, this person's having a hard time, you should just be kind to them? It's actually not enough. They need to actually get it for themselves, and then they can understand it. And the other thing is that you can build this by rote and then feel later. So, for example, if somebody is ill, you make them food. If somebody has a death in the family, you go over there and help them with chores or whatever it is. Over time, my kids are going to see these things that I do is what's normal. When somebody is having a hard time, you do these things. It doesn't mean that they get it from the inside. I don't care, as long as they start doing it, and then eventually they get the feeling of the reward, and then they'll do it more often, and then they build the understanding of the empathy of what it is actually like to be in someone's shoes, rather than you're just feeling bad or sorry for them. You really get what it feels like.
I often do hear about how a kindness to someone will get teens out of their own depression, out of their own head. So I think, again, so very timely. And you're making me think about Julie Lycop Haynes, when she says, when parents do for their children, we deny them the satisfaction of feeling good about their success. And I could see the same thing about, as parents, we need to create the opportunities for them. That's what occurs to me.
It's interesting too. One of my first jobs was, I talked about this last night, at Covenant House. It was a shelter for 18 to 21-year-olds. And these kids had nothing. They came from really tough places, and they were in a tough place at the shelter. And one of the things we did is once a month, we would go to a soup kitchen and they would serve. And of course, nobody wanted to do it. They have their own issues, their own problems, and nobody wants to go help somebody else. But we did. We would drag them. Amazing. Every single time, these kids who had nothing to give were able to give of themselves, felt good about themselves, felt that they were worth something, that they had meaning in their lives, that they didn't have to have a job or a home or money to make a difference in someone's life. And it was such a boost to see them shine after this experience. And I would, every time I would think, oh, this isn't going to go well. Nobody wants to go. Why do we force them to do this? And then we would do it, and it was like, amazing. So I think that just being able to give of yourself and giving kids the opportunity can really boost their self-esteem.
Absolutely. We used to have a program where students would volunteer out of their study hall to go into a classroom and help others. And it was interesting that one of our most diverse schools, where kids really more trauma than in other schools, those are the kids that really wanted to give back. And it was really a lovely thing to see. And as you say, it's those kids that really need the opportunity to give back to others.
Yes.
You talked about, and then the modeling as a family, doing it together. I often I think about when parents will say to their children, when it comes time to college applications, you better put some things down there about giving back. And I hope mom and dad are also doing that too, because it's very easy to say you need to go out and help, do something. But, if we're not modeling that behavior, it's going to, I think, fall on deaf ears. So in these times, that modeling piece is big, isn't it?
You know, it is. And actually, it's funny because when my daughter was in 8th grade, there was like a speaker who was talking about college applications. And she started to say, you know, now's the time you really want to start volunteering. And as a social worker, you know, it really bothered me. It was like, no, they shouldn't be volunteering so they can get into a better college. They should be volunteering because it's good for society. And
Right,
that's what we do for people. We help other people. And
right.
it should happen way before high school. So it was just something that really hit me as like a thing in this society now where it's like, you know, we volunteer so we get into college. And that really doesn't build the empathy and the actual connection that we're looking for.
Somebody once said, our kids smell inauthenticity like a junkyard dog. And so let's be authentic about that, right?
Yes.
You talked about your two children, how it was you have a son and a daughter, 17 and 14. And you mentioned that your daughter was less all in about it. So do you see how temperament, you know, is there something to temperament that some kids are just more willing? What's that about?
You know, I think it's some kids understand social cues, they understand feelings, they feel a lot themselves personally, so they may be more in touch with what feelings are like, and other kids they don't, they're more on a surface level. You know, they just they don't understand facial recognition, they don't understand social cues, and this is like a range. You know, there are some kids that really don't get it, and there are some kids that kind of get a little nudge and then they can kind of see it. But what was interesting to me in my family was that we were the same parents and we had two kids
Yes.
come out very
Okay.
differently, which really goes to, you know, who they are as people, accepting where they are and then
Mhm,
building from there, you know, and
mhm.
not kind of beating yourself up. Oh, what did I do? Okay, well, what can I do now? What can we do? And it was just amazing to see the change that even with the most resistant, there was change.
Yep, yep. And it is you're making me think about, and sometimes those kids who've had more bumps along the road have more of that sensitivity about what it's like when you hit a bump. Or someone who maybe just has sailed smooth may not have that, right?
But it
Um,
could go either way. Kids with a lot of bumps sometimes really shut down. They don't have anything to give. And then there are kids that really can use that as relatable content to relate to other people and connect. So it could go either way.
Interesting, interesting. Well, let's see what people are interested in hearing about. Let us know in the chat some of the concerns that we have. Our family coach expert with us here today.
Someone says, like, how do you help parents whose kids might be in the system to to build empathy to be better parents? You know, it's difficult when you're working with parents that also have had a lot of bumps and don't have a lot to give. And I think a lot of times we can ask them to fake it until they make it. And so a lot of times I tell parents to praise their kids 3 times during the day, even if they don't feel like it, even if they don't mean it, to have a relatable quiet time and to have a very short period of time. So I'll ask parents to play with their kids for 5 minutes or 10 minutes only and instruct nothing. Just be there and follow the kid's lead for 5 or 10 minutes. And again, it puts the focus on the child and it really changes the dynamic. And I just work with very small goals in the beginning. Don't expect big changes, very, very small things, so that they can kind of build. And I try to give the parents as much as I can as the support person, because they need it too. Like they're not able to give it because they need it. So I try and give them the support, again, model what I'm looking to see, give lots of examples, and then ask them if they really can't do it to fake it. And eventually it becomes something real.
You mentioned last night about self-care, and I love the way that you the analogy to love languages. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. So, you know, self-care is something that, you know, I think when the movement started happening, it was something that was seen as like, you know, oh, you're special if you think you need self-care, like, you know, you're giving yourself time for it. And, you know, martyr people would kind of be like, yeah, I don't really need that, or I don't have time for it. But the thing is, it's so vital to being able to care for yourself first, so that you can then help care for other people. And I say, there isn't one self-care for everybody. It is, to me, it is like the love languages. What is it that you need for care? What is it that, kind of boosts you? For some people, it's being with other people. For introverts, it's being alone. For some people, it's touch, massage, a pedicure. For some people, it's warm, being in a bubble bath, or taking some time out, or reading, or meditation. You have to kind of find what works for you. Parents have to do it. Teachers have to do it. Social workers, certainly, this is a requirement. So yeah, 5 languages.
Last night, there was so much, although it was targeted at the early child, there was so much that would relate to a high school parent as well, which I thought was so interesting. And one of the important takeaways for me is, if you can't follow through, then ignore it or say yes. And certainly for any age. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah. So a lot of times what happens is parents say no, like, can I go out to my friend's house? Can I watch another show? Can I have more dessert? And parent says no. And then the child has disapproval and is whining, complaining, angry, negotiating, all the things. And then the parent, for whatever reason, decides, okay, yes. So that no and then yes, basically you're reinforcing the negative behavior. You're encouraging them to do these things more often, because eventually they got what they wanted. So what I tell parents, if you say no, it has to be no. We're not doing this. But if you feel like you can't do the no, you're just, especially in the pandemic, especially if you've been working, you're sick, you're down. If you don't feel like you can say no to a request, then just say yes. Like, nothing terrible is going to happen if you eat pizza, or if you eat in front of the television, or if your kid gets an extra show, or if you skip bath, whatever it is. Sometimes just saying yes alleviates a lot of stress of parents. And then they don't get in a situation where they should have said no and stuck with no, but then they want to overturn it. And it takes practice. I said yesterday, like, I come from a place of no comes out first. I don't know why. Some people say yes first. So for me, sometimes I say no, and I think, well, why did I even say no? That was silly. But it's important to be able to follow through if you're really going to put in a discipline, or you're really going to say no to something. But if you just don't feel like it's in you, just say yes.
The other takeaway that stuck with me, you talked about the developmental, or just the particulars of one particular child, and how understand that how your parental satisfaction will increase. So if you just let some things go, like talking loudly, or so can you speak about that a minute? I love that.
Yeah. So I was talking about annoying behaviors, and this actually works just as much in the classroom. When kids are annoying, it's our inclination to address them and to discipline or ask them to stop. Loud talking, kids that can't really sit in their seat, that are kind of all over the place, kids that are nudgy, just all kinds of the annoying stuff that makes us crazy. What we want to do is tell them to stop. But first of all, as soon as we tell them to stop, for the kids that are doing it on purpose to get attention, it just reinforces it. But for a good number of kids, they're annoying by accident. Like, they can't help it. They talk loud. Maybe they are on the spectrum. Maybe they have ADHD. They do these behaviors that maybe aren't socially acceptable, but they can't help it. So that when we address those things all the time, then we're almost making the kids feel bad about something that they really can't do. So they can't stop. So as much as we can kind of look the other way, if it's really not disruptive, or it's really no harm, that we kind of ignore it. And the funny thing that happens for parents and for teachers, when they stop addressing all of these behaviors, they almost stop seeing them. It stops being annoying. It stops bothering them, because they don't feel like they have to change it all the time. So I've had so many parents tell me, it is so freeing. You mean, if my kid is like falling off the chair at the dinner table, I don't have to say something? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, if they're eating their dinner and they're doing it like a mess, let it go. Like, your relationship is so much more important. Your kid's self-esteem is so much more important, and you'll feel better. And then they go ahead, they have their meals, they stop addressing the way the kids are eating, and they feel so much better, and the meals are so much better, and their relationship is better.
The relationship and the connection is key. Thank you.
That's the most important thing.
So we hear a lot about when kids go back to school, how we have to be ready as staff in schools, parents. Some advice for us when these kids do go back. How can we help them?
So I think we have to plan for a reentry period. I always use the joke, like when my kids would go to the grandparents' house and they were like spoiled, like rotten, they would come back to my house and we sort of had to have a reentry period where we kind of reestablished rules. I expected some crazy behavior, some testing behavior, especially going back into schools. There's going to be a lot of social anxiety. There's going to be a lot of confusion about how we do things in class. Kids have had a very lax time at many homes in terms of rules and guidelines for dress, for hair, for behavior, for how they sit, where they sit. And I think that's going to be a real adjustment going back to school to kind of getting into all of these things. So I think the more we create structure and we have kids, get back on that structure quickly is important, but also to understand that we're going to have some growing pains, and then especially socially, especially with mental health. I think kids are really desperate to go back to school, but their muscles are kind of loose. They're not. And for kids that already had some anxiety, I think that it's going to be a really difficult time. They're going to need more help getting to know each other again.
Good point. Thank you. Jerica's letting me know there's a question in the Q&A we'll address.
Okay.
Jerica, you want to share?
Sure. We have a question wondering what's the relationship between empathy and children with ADHD?
I don't know. I mean, I can't say based on research. I'm just going to say from my practice, I think that there are some kids with ADHD that are incredibly sensitive, highly sensitive kids. And I think there are some kids with ADHD that are not at all sensitive kids. So I think it can run the gamut. I think one is temperament and the other it is something very different. So I think you can see either way, honestly, with kids with ADHD.
Okay, we have one participant who is wondering, how do we encourage school leaders to make kindness the culture in school?
So I think a lot of times school leaders are overwhelmed with just the education and running the school and dealing with problems, and that it's hard to start something new. So maybe parents take this on. Maybe it's one social worker or counselor that decides to make this their project, rather than asking for funds or asking for a big change. Take it on and make some small changes. Start with it. You become the kindness commissioner, and it could be just kids and parents. It could be a PTA initiative to start with. I think that would actually be great. The more that the whole school or even the district is involved, the more this really becomes a culture. But I think you can start with baby steps and build, a little at a time.
I think that's an excellent point. And here at Glenbard, that was kind of the case exactly. When we went to administration, completely overwhelmed, not that that they're not all in, but just overwhelmed. So we began a committee called the X Committee, Advocating Character Through Service. And the X Committee does a few events every year, and it is parent volunteers. And one of them is Gratitude Day just before Thanksgiving, where the students they come to the cafeteria, they receive pizza, and they write cards and letters to anyone. Valentine's for Vets is another one where the X Committee is involved. Very simple. So I think you're absolutely right about that parents can play such a vital role here.
Yep.
Yes. Is there anything else in the Q&A? Otherwise, we've got just a couple of minutes. We'll wrap things up. Do you see anything, Jerica?
No, we're good for now.
So when you go to schools, and I know you have lots of things that you want to share. Last night, we talked a lot. We really directed our comments to early child, but I know you also give, do lectures for older children. So in the next couple of minutes that we've got, we're having you back. But in the meantime, what do you think the parents of high school kids need to know about Ignore It?
It's funny. Parents forget that you don't parent teenagers the same way you parented younger kids. And so a lot of times kids have made a shift, they've changed, but we're still trying to parent them the exact same way with a high level of control, a high level of involvement. And not only is that not good for the kid, it's definitely not good for the relationship. And I think that's why there's a lot of strife. Actually, Julie Lycop Haynes, I went to hear her speak, and I do this for a living too. And she said something that completely changed my thinking. And she said, the job of parents is to put yourself out of a job. And I think for teenagers, we need to make that shift at a very early, 8th grade, 9th grade level, where we're starting to give them more responsibility. We're starting to expect more from them. We're starting to let go of our control. And I would like to keep the control personally. I would like to decide how my kids dress and what they do with their hair. I would like to decide who their friends are. I don't get to decide that anymore because, first of all, it's not good for them. It's definitely not good for our relationship. And I also can't control that anymore. And so the more parents can kind of let go, look at the kid they have, look at the skills that they want to build, and really start planning for that 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, little by little building on those skills so that you have a kid that goes to college that is actually prepared. They can cook, they can do laundry, they know how to call a doctor's appointment, they can fill out forms, they can write a check, they can actually do these things, but they can also care for their emotional state. They can deal with their emotions because they've made mistakes and nothing terrible happened. They've learned from difficult times without their parents rescuing them all the time. So that is really a shift that has to happen in parenting. And I almost think parents need a little tap on the shoulder sometimes to be reminded, because they're conscientious parents. They care about their kids. They're really wanting to help them. This is all coming from a sense of love. But the thing is, they're really preventing them. So like my daughter will come with like a cheese stick and she's like, I can't open this. Can you help me? And I'm like, do you want to eat cheese sticks in college? Because if you do, you're going to have to figure out a way to open that. I mean, that's kind of become the joke, but like, it helps me remember, like, she's going to go off to college and I'm going to want her to make sure she can, eat for herself.
That's so true. That's so true. I guess someone wrote, return a shirt. You should know how to return something at the store, right? Right.
Yes. And not only that, I think kids are really fearful these days of doing these kinds of things, of calling an adult, of how to ask for a job, how to return, how to speak to a doctor. I mean, they're texting, they don't actually talk to people, and they have this real fear. So they've got to really do it in a safe, comfortable environment. And maybe in the beginning you go with your kid and they do the talking, but you're there. Maybe the next time you wait in the car, little baby steps to build their independence.
Yes. Yeah. I remember someone saying, going to the library, make, as you say, baby steps. That's it all the way. You're also reminding me, someone said, we know this is such a challenging time. We know anxiety is up. And we know that when children go off to college, sometimes mental health issues will surface. And I recall someone, I don't remember who said this, but they mentioned how if there is the slightest bit of concern, how valuable it is to get that help while your child is in your home, while they're in high school, and break down that stigma that about getting help.
Yeah, I think it's partly address anxiety issues and depression issues early. And I mean, we're really seeing a lot of anxiety, even in elementary school children. They're muscling through, right? They're still doing school, they're still doing activities, but there's a lot of anxiety there. And a lot of parents just try to adapt the situation to help the child. But really what we should be doing is addressing the anxiety so that they can, really build their skills to manage as they get older. But I think a lot of focus is on getting your kids into college and having the best opportunity, and the best chance of success is the best college. And I really don't believe that. And I really believe that is causing a great deal of anxiety. And also it's preventing kids from, trying and failing, from managing emotions, for doing a variety of things. They're just kind of on autopilot because they've got to do all these things to get into the good college. Then they get into that good college and they haven't built the foundation, and they fall apart. This is not what we want. I don't care what good college you go to. So we really have to deal with their emotions, their anxiety and depression, and we have to get them off this treadmill and really allow them to, like I said, make mistakes, fail the test, not get to play in the game because they didn't get their uniform, all these things so that they can build the skills to manage when they leave the nest.
You know, I really think that is the crux of it all. This internal drive that we have as parents to make it better. It's how we're wired. Some of us more so than others. And in really hearing people like you tell us over and over again, we are not benefiting them when we smooth the road for the child, but we have to prepare the child for the road. On this last question, can you respond to how important it is for parents to stay positive at this time in conversation with their children?
Like in terms of the pandemic?
In terms of the pandemic, when our children come to us and they just feel that life is so horrible, and I think we touched on this a little bit. The last thing you want to say is, well, at least, and take away, stop at least anyway. At least you have a roof on your head. At least you have food on the table. That's
Right.
not what they want to hear.
No.
And on how are staying positive, not when, but if, those kinds of things. Our role is positive, keeping a positive attitude.
Well, I think before we can even be positive, we have to listen and validate their feelings.
Yes.
I'm on a lot of parenting boards on groups in Facebook, and parents would say how disappointed their kids are, or that their kid isn't getting a prom, and then immediately parents would be like, "Well, at least they don't have COVID, and their friends and parents are alive." Yes, all of that is true, but you can still be sad and grieve the losses that you have, even if they're not the greatest losses that people could have. And I think parents sometimes do, well, at least, or it's not that big of a deal, or you had it last year. That doesn't make anybody feel heard. And so I want to give kids and their parents an opportunity to say, this stinks, I'm really upset. Like, I really miss doing all these things. And the parent should say, I hear you. I really miss it too. Like, yeah, this is really hard, and not be afraid that I think parents are afraid their kids are going to dive deeper into sadness and depression if they acknowledge how terrible it really is. But I think what happens is they don't acknowledge it. The kid doesn't feel heard, and then they dig deeper into it. So it's really important to acknowledge those feelings and validate those feelings, and not feel like, well, somebody always has it worse. That makes us feel even worse about ourselves. So I think, especially with young kids too, to talk a little bit honestly in an age appropriate way about, this is a difficult time, but we're here and we're going to get through it. We're going to, do what we can to get through it. And this isn't going to be forever. There are hard times, but we're going to get through it. And, in my house personally, like, we've just changed a lot of the way we do things to make life more fun, to make it more palatable. I never got Starbucks every day. Now it's like a thing that all of us get Starbucks. It's just one tiny thing, but it's something we do together, and it's something we can do safely. And that's going to end when the pandemic ends. But for now, that's what we can do. That's something silly, but we eat in front of the TV. We have nothing left to say. We spend time together in front of the TV. That makes us have a good time together. This is something I never would have done before. So you're going to change things to accommodate this time, try and make the best of it, and listen, really listen to your kids.
I mentioned last night that from a parent that she said she's going to give herself pass-fail grades now. That's all, just pass-fail grades. And I think about Ken Ginsberg, who was with us in the fall, and he talked about how if we use this time to really build a connection with our children, and empathizing with them, as you just said, is going to build that connection. And if we take the time to build this connection and relationship, which, as you said, is so key, not only will we be fine, but we might even be finer. So I've loved this conversation. I hope everybody on the call has too. And we have it to share, which is so wonderful of you. Everybody, please come back, share the resource. We've got Instagram going now. We'd love you to join us. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Pearlman. It was just an honor and a pleasure, and everyone else on this call. We have another noon talk we've just added, which is coming up with Dr. Matt Dewar. We'll talk about mindfulness. That's happening on April 21st. It's not in the brochure because it's just added, and he'll be speaking at night as well. So come back, and Catherine, you'll come back too, okay?
Thank you so much.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.